Hi, hello, and welcome to the first class of the extrusion module. This is our longest module in this course because we do have a lot of information to cover. But I'm also very happy and excited to be here presenting this module. I'm excited because this is the equipment that you're going to spend most of your effort and time. This is the process where you create your product. This is where you shape the pellet. The extrusion process is a very special process because here is where the magic happens. Here is where we take the mash that comes from the grinder and we transform it and shape it into our final product. So stay with me. It's a lot of information, but I know that you're going to benefit a lot from it. All right, so this class is about the extrusion process, but before I dive into the details of how it works, I'd like to share a small story with you. This story goes back to when I was a little child, about 6 or 7 years old. I loved playing with Play-Doh. I remember getting a Happy Meal toy from McDonald's that came with a Play-Doh press. You could put the dough inside, and when you push down on the lever, the dough would be forced through small holes shaped like stars, circles. And I could also make long pasta noodles. I was particularly fascinated by the purple one. I don't remember his name, but I used to forcing the dough through the little square holes and making long pasta noodles. Little I know that many years later, I would discover that this simple kid's toy was based on the same principle as the extrusion process. It's amazing how childhood play can connect to real-world technology. And in fact, there are so many things in life that use the same principle. The principle behind extrusion is essentially pushing material through a small hole. So take this morning, for example. When you brushed your teeth, you used toothpaste. And by squeezing the tube, you created pressure, forcing the paste out through a small opening. This everyday action is based on the same principle as extrusion. So whether it's Play-Doh or toothpaste, the fundamental idea is the same. Now, let's explore how we can apply this principle to produce high-quality feed. I want to start this class by defining how the extrusion process works. When we think about the extrusion process, we have to think about two equipment working together. The very first one is the conditioner, and right underneath the conditioner is the extruder. So, think about the extrusion process as a two-step process. The very first step is conditioning. The second step is extrusion. The very first piece of equipment that we have in the extrusion process is the conditioner. I will explain more about how it works in this presentation, but here you have a nice view of the equipment. In every single conditioner that we have, and it doesn't matter what supplier you're using, you're going to have a bin before the conditioner. This is actually a special bin, and we call it a live bin. We nickname it as live bin because inside this bin, you always have an agitator to guarantee that material will flow with no interruption to the conditioner. The live bin will receive the mash that is coming from the grinding and mixing process. So, to refresh our memory, we have batches of ground ingredients that comes from the grinding and mixing process, and these batches are transported into the live bin. Then, from the live bin, the batch of ground material is continuously transported into the conditioner by this screw. This screw is often nicknamed as feeder screw. The important thing about the feeder screw is that we can adjust the speed that the feeder screw turns. This means that the feeder screw will transport more or less material inside the conditioner, depending on the speed that it will turn, and that will regulate your extrusion process capacity. And from the feeder screw, the material continuously falls inside the conditioner. Well, the conditioner is where you start cooking your material. So here you have a continuous flow of ground material that is transported into the conditioner. And inside the conditioner, we have a continuous flow of material that is cooked. And as material is cooked, it is also transported towards the extruder. And from the conditioner, we have a continuous flow of material that will fall inside the extruder. And inside the extruder is where we finally produce our pellets. But let's focus now on what happens in the conditioning step. The conditioner is the equipment where we start cooking our product, but how does the conditioner do that? From the live bin, the feeder screw transports a constant and continuous flow of mash into the conditioner. Then, inside the conditioner, we have paddles, and these paddles will move our mash of product forward towards the extruder. And while that mash is being moved forward along the conditioner, we're going to inject water and we're going to inject steam inside the conditioner. Water will humidify our mash of product, and steam will heat it up to start cooking it. And here comes the second and very important job of the paddles. They will not only move our mash of product forward along the conditioner, but they will also agitate that mash to mix it with water and steam. And how does the conditioner work? In simple terms, we have pretty much three things happening inside the conditioner at the same time. We inject water close to the inlet of the equipment to humidify the dry mash of product that is entering the equipment from the feeder screw. We also inject steam inside the conditioner, and we're going to inject steam just after injecting water. We inject steam to heat up and start cooking the mash of product before the extruder. And then we have the rotating paddles inside the conditioner. And paddles have two jobs here. The first job is to move the mash of product forward along the conditioner towards the extruder. The second and important job is to mix the mash with water and steam that we are injecting inside the equipment. And once the conditioner has done its job and the mash of product is humidified and hot, that hot cooked mash will continuously fall from the conditioner into the extruder. And it is the extruder, the equipment that will continue process that hot mash and cook that mash even more and transform that hot mash that is coming from the conditioner into the pellet that we want to produce. The extruder is such a special equipment because it's the extruder that will form our pellets, that will shape our product. Here is where the magic really happens. Now, let's start talking about what happens inside the extruder. First of all, we need to remember that in this process, we continuously send hot mash from the conditioner into the extruder. This mash is going to be transported along the extruder, and the friction between the extruder screw and barrel will transform this mash into a dough. You can imagine that this dough would be very similar to a kid's play dough inside the extruder. Once again, every extruder is composed of screw and barrel, and these two parts work together, and we have a very small gap in between these two elements. As the screw convey the mash coming from the conditioner forward along the extruder, it forces the mash to pass through this tiny gap between the screw and the barrel. Because this gap is very small, it will cause friction and pressure in the mash. This friction will heat up and cook the mash and transform the mash into a hot dough. In the extruder, we can also inject more water and steam to cook this dough even more. And then, finally, at the very end of the extruder, we have a die that will cause this dough to expand and form the pellet with any shape you want. Let's understand a bit better each of these steps that happen inside the extruder. So, let's talk about the screw and barrel. Again, every extruder is composed of screw and barrel, and we do have very little gap in between these two elements. So, the screw will convey the hot mash that is coming from the conditioner forward along the extruder. And while it moves the mash forward, it forces the mash to pass through this tiny gap between the screw and barrel. As the mash is forced through this small gap, it will become hotter and hotter because of all the friction that happens. The mash will also be compressed in between the flights of the screw, and this compression will cause the pressure inside the extruder to increase. And then, at the far end of the extruder, you have your die plate. The die is an extremely important piece of equipment at your extrusion process. Your die is the piece that will give the shape to your pellet and is the one that will create the restriction of flow of dough necessary to expand your product. The die will have many holes with the same shape of your product. So, if you want to produce a circular type of product, your die holes will be circular as well. If you are producing pet food and your product needs to be shaped like little bones, then your die needs to be shaped like little bones. If your product needs to be triangular or square, it doesn't matter. You can be really creative here. But the important thing is that the shape of your die hole will be the shape of your product, but the correct die selection is not just about the correct shape of your die hole. We also need to think about the correct amount of holes. The less holes you have in your die plate, the more restriction you will cause to the flow of dough inside your extruder, and consequently, you're going to have more pressure behind the die. That will cause more expansion to your product. And the other way around is also true. If you have too many holes in your die plate, then you have very little restriction of flow in your extruder. Consequently, the pressure behind the die will be lower and your product will expand less. Important thing here is the amount of holes that you have in your die is related to the expansion and density you have in your product. In here, we have the very last piece of equipment that we're going to cover in this presentation, and that is the cutter. The hot dough of product that is coming from inside the extruder will pass through the die plate, and as the dough leaves the die, it will expand. When dough leaves the die, the dough will expand like a bubble and be transformed in your product, and then the cutter comes to play. The cutter will cut that bubble of product that is leaving the extruder and make the pellets. The job of the cutter is really to cut that material that is living the die and form the pellet. I just want to mention now a few characteristics that the cutter needs to have to work properly. Any cutter that you work with will have knives attached to it, and those knives needs to be sharp. They need to be sharp to give a very clean cut on your product, because that will guarantee that you'll have a very beautiful, well-cut pellet. The cutter can also change the speed that it spins. So the faster is the speed of your cutter. The faster it spins, the shorter your pellets will be. On the other way around, if your cutter is spinning very slowly, then you will produce very long pellets. In conclusion, the knives of your cutter need to be sharp, and by adjusting the speed that your cutter spins, you will adjust the length of your pellets. All right. In this class, we have covered a lot about the extrusion process. We have spoken about the job of the conditioner, the job of the extruder, and how both equipment should work together. But this is just the first step. There's still a lot to learn. There's a lot to cover. So hold on to your hats, because this is just the beginning. There is so much knowledge out there waiting to be explored, and lucky for you, we've got many classes in this module. Just to mention few of the things that we will explore. We will move now deep into the conditioning process. We will explore the concepts behind the extruder screw and barrel design. We will learn the art of tweaking those extruder parameters to produce high-quality feed at high capacity. And don't even get me started on troubleshooting production problems, because we do have a lot about that. So, my friends, consider this your invitation to join us on this journey. And whether you're thirsty for more insights, have questions, or just want to discuss the challenges you're facing in your factory, we're here for you. All you have to do is to shoot us an email at ebf.training@outlook.com, and let's start a conversation that'll light up your production line. Now, I thank you for your audience. See you in the next class. Until next time, stay curious. Stay hungry for knowledge. Bye.